Sports podcast.
Welcome to the All Sports Podcast with me, Matt, and today, Joel. How are you, mate?
Hey Matt, all good mate, how are you?
Really good, thanks. On we go to F1, the British Grand Prix at Silverstone this weekend. A wet one. I woke up Sunday morning, 10 minutes away from Silverstone, and it was bucketing it down, and I was so pleased for a wet British Grand Prix.
Yeah, exactly the way it should be, it feels like. But yeah, it caused some issues, didn't it? It's particularly
Yeah,
in the first half of the
specifically,
race.
interestingly, for the rookies, right?
Yes, yeah, they really struggled. One in particular didn't, but he had a good day in the end, Oliver Beerman. But yeah, all the other rookies were out. It's like by lap 20, they all out.
Yeah, pretty much. I think Kimi Antonelli retired his car a little bit later. Maybe no. Yeah, lap 23. Okay, yeah, not far off.
Yeah, they were
Something like
dropping
that. So.
close in the early part of the race. Some of them spent more time going sideways or backwards than they did forwards.
Yeah, which was pretty fun to watch. One specific one I saw was Lewis Hamilton clearly struggling in the Ferrari in the wet, doing a power slide round the outside of two cars, overtaking with some late braking, which was the classic Lewis Hamilton in the wet and specifically at Silverstone as well. Honourable mention to him for his record now ending of 13 or 14 consecutive podiums.
I think it would
at
have been
Silverstone.
13 if
It'd have been 13. But in his first entrance 14 years ago, it was still a fourth place. So he's not finished outside the top four in 14 years. That's insane.
Yeah, it was a good drive from him. I thought there were
Yeah.
some hairy moments, and he got a little bit frustrated over the radio about the halfway point. I think he radioed over saying how hard the car was to drive, or something like that. But after that point, he looked pretty strong. And once he'd gone in for, I think, his second stop to change back onto the softs, he had a lap where he didn't have much traction, but after that, he was setting fastest laps for a couple of laps in a row, and it looked like he might reel Hulkenberg in, but it didn't quite happen in the end. But still, a pretty impressive run with some really patient driving from Hamilton at some points. There was a point in the race where I think Gasly was keeping him at bay, not really allowing him the opportunity to overtake. And he did the same thing with Verstappen as well, Gasly. He kind of held his position, some good defensive driving, but yeah, Hamilton was patient and eventually went past him. And at that point, I thought he must be on because I think Stroll was going backwards at that point as well, and he got past him really quickly. So I really thought he'd reel Hulkenberg in, but it wasn't quite to be on the day.
Yeah, because his lap times were much faster than other people around him. Max was an interesting one before we go up to the podium. Max was an interesting one because he obviously started first with probably one of the best qualifying laps or the best laps at Silverstone that there's ever been. It was just pitch perfect, nailed every braking zone, every apex, perfect on the throttle and through the gears. And that's what it takes in that Red Bull to be ahead of those McLarens that are so far ahead of the rest of the field. So a little bit of a shame that that doesn't translate to race pace because he's got a higher ride height. So he doesn't have the same downforce in a race that the other cars have got. So that race pace isn't there for him. And especially in the wet, he'll have been even more compromised. So actually to scrape to a fifth, and he reported how slow and heavy and clunky the car felt throughout the race. So that's actually a fairly decent performance from him and still keeps him in the running in the overall standings. But we must go on to Nico Hulkenberg after 239 consecutive Grand Prix without a podium. What an achievement.
So it's not that he's never had a podium before, right? He's had one, but it's just been a long time.
He's never had one.
He's never had one, okay.
No.
Wow, yeah. One podium, 239 starts.
One and done. But they celebrated like they'd won the Drivers' Championship.
Yeah.
Because that must be how significant an achievement it is to him just to get onto the podium. And it was funny, he didn't really know where he was going or what he was doing. I saw one thing with Norris bringing his helmet in for him because he didn't know he was supposed to bring his helmet in and display it in the top 3 cabinets.
Yeah, it was very endearing. And their celebrations afterwards, like you could tell that they were just absolutely chuffed to bits for him.
Interestingly, the driver now that has got the most starts without a podium, any guesses? Interesting one, given
But
who
still,
he drives for.
still racing. Or is it? No, surely not. My guess was gonna be, but that can't be correct.
I edit that out if you like.
Yeah, please do.
It's Yuki Tsunoda with 99 starts and
I
no
didn't
podium.
realise he had that many starts. I never would have said he had that many starts. How long is it?
So racing in the Red Bull, you'd expect the top cars to podium. At some point, he's bound to mop up a podium like George does so frequently. But I think the next all time, who probably will never get one now, is Adrian Sutil, 128 Grand Prix starts.
Wow, so Hulkenberg was a long way clear of both of them.
Yeah. He was committed. He was in it for the long haul. He's off that list now.
Yeah, really nice moment. It's a funny one because I don't know if he had to. I mean, obviously during the coverage, I feel like all of a sudden he was third and Stroll was second, and it was a bit like I'm not really sure how that happened.
Yeah, is it pit
Yeah.
misalignment or something like that? Yeah.
Yeah, there were a few things happening at that point of the race, and all of a sudden those two were just there. So I can't really get it into my head whether it was like brilliant driving or just he ended up there and then didn't make a mistake.
I think there are a few reasons why. The experience versus the rookies. So you look at who went out and in what order. Franco Colapinto, Liam Lawson, Bortoletto, his teammate, Hulkenberg's teammate at Sauber, Isaac Hadjar, then Kimi Antonelli, and then everyone else finished from 15th down. So he started in 19th. So he's got obviously those cars. Started 19th, insane. Started in 19th, finished third. I hope he got driver of the day. I'm assuming he did.
He was way ahead on that pole with 4 or 5 laps to go, I think.
Yeah, if you can't win it, if you can't win it after that. But yeah, from 19th to third. But look at the people that he went past. So it's not like he did it in a wet qualifying and the race was wet, lots of safety cars, and he was lucky. He finished ahead of Russell, Alonso, Verstappen, and Hamilton, who are all demons in the wet.
It all started a long way in front of him.
And they're all in much faster cars.
Yeah.
Objectively, much faster cars. So yeah, credit to him. I think his experience after that amount of Grand Prix definitely pays off when you have that amount of wet races and you know what's going to happen in the race and you know the safety cars are going to come, and when you do need to pit, you shouldn't really ever pit in a wet race like that when there isn't a safety car. There's no reason to do a normal pit because a safety car is guaranteed. So you just got to hold it out there and just wait for the next safety car, or else you're losing 10 seconds of time. So his pits were great. Actually, just back to Sutil quickly. One little link between Sutil and Hulkenberg. Both raced for Sauber. So that was Sutil's last team as well, Sauber. So it's a nice bookend to the Sutil lack of podium is that Hulkenberg actually did it with Sauber.
Speaking about pit stops yesterday, though, and needing to get them right, George Russell did not get his right, I don't think. So he was one of a few who came in after the formation lap. I can't remember who else came in, but he was one of them. And like on lap 7 or 8, he radios over with a sarcastic, and now it's raining. Brilliant. I mean, everybody else seemed to know it was going to rain. Why didn't Mercedes?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. It was a massive risk.
Yeah.
The payout was probably a podium.
Yeah.
From fourth. Just from that position, I don't know that I'd have done it from fourth.
From
lower down the grid, it made sense. I don't think so.
And then he gambled again towards the back end of the race, and that didn't work out either. Kind of came out and immediately did he spin or did he?
Yeah, straight away. And again, Alonso had just done it and come out on slicks, and they didn't wait to see how Alonso went. They pitted themselves deciding that it was the right decision and really should have waited on Alonso because he wasn't doing any quicker times and he was struggling to maintain grip. So it wasn't the right call, but it's the classic undercut. Go early versus stay out. And on this occasion, it's not worked out for them. Some Ferrari-esque decisions from the Mercedes this weekend for sure. And Ferrari seemed to make the right decisions this weekend, which was nice to see for once. However, like Lewis said, just not happy with the setup of the car for the wet race, but just overall for the weekend anyway, which is surprising because the Ferrari had looked quick in free practices through the weekend and was looking quite quick last weekend. So it looked like they'd turned a little bit of a corner with the car, but not from the way that Charles Leclerc drove, finishing in 14th and out of the points, and then Lewis fighting for his life just to get the 4th place.
Yeah, I feel like Leclerc's not having a good season.
No, can't quite pinpoint it. If they'd all but given up development on the car because of the new regs next season, or if it's a Hamilton factor.
Yeah, he's got more points than Hamilton, so maybe you're being a little bit of recency bias there.
But they're probably not where they'd expect to be 5th and 6th in the drivers' championship, aren't they? So, and there's a gap between George Russell and them, 147 to 119, from George to Charles Leclerc, 4th to 5th. So, yeah, it's definitely not where they'd expect to be. Second half of the season will be interesting for them if they do choose to put much time and investment into developing the car. There's a lot of pressure coming on the. He's not called a race director. What's it called? What do they call it? It's team principal. Yeah, there's a lot of pressure coming on the team principal, Fred Vasseur, at the moment at Ferrari. Wouldn't be surprised, given how trigger happy Ferrari can be with their team principals, if he might not make it through the summer. Worst case scenario, and at best, I don't think he'll be there for the new car regs next season. If they finish where they are now and they don't get much more improvement out of the car and the drivers, I can see that he'll be the one that takes the hit. Certainly not Hamilton or Leclerc.
No. Hamilton's talking about upgrades for forthcoming races today.
And they've all got them scheduled. And they talk about the significance of the upgrades. But we'll see. Like I said, I thought the Ferrari had looked quicker last weekend in Austria and then was quicker again in free practices at Silverstone. Then didn't quite have it in the race. But is that just because of the wet? So we'll see. Like you said, recency bias, maybe looking like Charles not doing as well, and a lot of focus on Hamilton, especially with the home Grand Prix. So you don't notice that actually it's Leclerc that's ahead in the standings. So on to the top of the standings, managed to make it what, 10 minutes into 15 minutes into an F1 chat without talking about the McLarens at the top. Did you see Oscar Piastri's penalty and what he was penalised for?
Yes, I did see it. Yeah, I feel like it was harsh considering that type of thing seems to happen quite a lot. And
yes, yeah, that's what I was thinking as well, based on George Russell doing it to Max Verstappen just 2 weeks ago. Was it in Canada he did it? I think he almost brake checked it in Canada, and he went over the radio saying, Max has overtaken me under safety car. And it was exactly the same thing. Max is obviously keeping so tight and with his foot hovering on the accelerator for as soon as Piastri chooses to go. And Piastri, he's tapped his brakes, obviously, because he wants to control the speed. And it has said that safety car's ending. I thought it was incredibly harsh.
Yeah, and once that happened, it felt like they kind of took stock for a couple of laps, figured out what they were going to do. And eventually he pitted and they just kind of sat for 10 seconds, paid the penalty there.
Yeah, they just took that.
And he comes back out maybe 4 or 5 seconds behind Norris then. And straight away he's on the radio. Okay, should we swap back now and race? Does that sound good?
It was cringy. That was very cringy. He said, I don't think it's fair. And if you don't think it was fair either, the way he worded it, it was quite difficult to hear. But Norris had been closing in on him, to be fair. Norris had been reducing the gap to Piastri, and they'd already said to Piastri, if he gets within DRS, then don't fight it. So they'd already said, Lando's on for this one. And he did. He had a perfect race. We spoke about it last week. We predicted it correctly. However, I don't think we knew it was going to go this way to nail our prediction, that it was going to be because of the wet race and the time penalty. But he still, like, irrespective of that, he still finished 6.5 seconds ahead of Piastri. Piastri didn't particularly close the gap after taking the penalty either. So Lando did have a really flawless race. I thought he was going to qualify fastest. He looked incredibly fast in qualifying, and in free practice, but then didn't do it in Q3, which is what we've come to expect with him, that he isn't nailing it in Q3. But then did in the race, did everything he needed to do in the race, kept out of trouble, made the right pits, drove safely, but took risks when he needed to, just stayed on the racing line, kept the tyres wet when they needed to be and dry when he went onto the softs. So yeah, credit to him. We said he would be buoyed, and I think now going over to Hungary, he will be as well. It's definitely the momentum we have now seen shift over the last couple of weekends in favour of Norris. And the gap at the top of the standings is getting very, very close. I think 15 points now only between them. Less, 9 points.
Yeah, really interesting test of Piastri now. Like the narrative around him has been how cool, calm, and collected he is, and that's all well and good if you're out in front and everything's going your way. But yeah, there's a bit of pressure on him now to be able to show that when Lando Norris is winning Grand Prix. So yeah, I agree. I thought Norris was like just pitch perfect, really. I think McLaren in general got all their decisions right and gave their drivers the best chance. Like, we're not talking about, they're in a privileged position where they kind of know that they've got the fastest cars, right, and they've got two drivers in the top three for qualifying. So they're in a great position anyway, and they don't need to take these risks that some of those other teams are taking in order to try and close the gap. So that's like obviously helping them with their strategy during the racing. But there was a point yesterday where they were just a long way out in front, the pair of them. I can't remember whether it was after the penalty or before, but it just felt like, okay, that's the first two set now. Like the only
Yeah, so there was a safety car, and then he served the penalty, and then they just moved away, and they were 30 seconds ahead of the rest of the pack. Even on a wet race where they've had safety cars that's brought them all back together again, that just shows the difference between the two. I mean, they were the only two drivers that managed to break 1 minute 30s for laps, whereas Hulkenberg's fastest lap was 1 minute 30.9. So he was 1.6 seconds slower on his fastest lap than what Piastri did. 1.6 seconds every lap. So, like, also a favourite of Hamilton's. I mean, Hamilton's won at so many tracks. He must really just love going to every single track.
We got Belgium. In between.
Have we? So on to Spa next, and then Hungary, and then it's the summer break. And that will do us for this week. If you've enjoyed listening along, you can like and subscribe on YouTube and Spotify. If you want to get in touch, email us at allsportspods@gmail.com, and we'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.
Cheers.